Okay, guys, today I'm going to read Psycho-Cybernetics, which is written by Maxwell Maltz. Maxwell Maltz, he is a good poet. Okay, let's read the first chapter of Psycho-Cybernetics. Uh, 24, yes. The self-image, your key to a better life. During the past decade, a revolution has been quite going on in the fields of psychology, psychiatry, and medicine. Now, theories and concepts concerning the self has grown out of the work and findings of clinical psychologists, practical psychiatrists, and cosmetic or so-called plastic surgeons. Now, methods growing out of these findings have resulted in rather dramatic changes in personality, health, and apparently even in basic abilities and talents. Chronic failures have become successful. F students have changed into straight A pupils with within a matter of days and with no extra tutoring. Shy, shy, retiring, inhibited personalities have become happy and outgoing. Writing in the January 1959 issue of Cosmopolitan magazine, T.F. James summarizes the result obtained by various psychologists and MDs as follows. Understanding the psychology of the self can mean the difference between the success and failure, love and hate, bitterness and happiness. The discovery of the real self can rescue a crumbling marriage, recreating a faltering career, and transform victims of personality failure. On another plane, discovering your real self means the difference between freedom and the compulsion of conformity. Your create a better life. The most important psychological discovery of this century is the discovery of the self image. Whether we realize it or not, each of us carries about with us a mental blueprint or picture of ourselves. It may be vague and ill defined to our conscious gaze. In fact, it may not be consciously recognizable at all, but it is there completely down to the last detail. This self image is our own conception of the sort of person I am. It has been built up from our own beliefs about ourselves. But most of these beliefs about ourselves have unconsciously been formed from our past experiences, our success and failures, our humiliations, our triumphs, and the way other people have reacted to us, especially in early childhood. From all these, we mentally construct a self or a picture of self. Once an idea or a belief about ourselves goes into this picture, it comes true. As far as we personally are concerned, we do not question its validity but proceed to act upon it as if it were true. This self image becomes a golden key to living a better life because of two important discoveries. All our actions, feelings, behaviors, even our abilities are always consistent with this self image. In short, you will act like the sort of person who conceives yourself to be. Not only this, but you literally cannot act otherwise. In spite of all your conscious effort or willpower, the man who conceives himself to be a failure type person will find some way to fail. In spite of all these good intentions or his willpower, even if opportunity is literally dumped in his lap, the person who conceives himself to be a victim of injustice, one who was meant to suffer, will invariably find circumstances to verify his opinions. The self image is a premise, a base, or a foundation upon which your entire personality, your behavior, and even your circumstances are built. Because of this, your experience seem to verify and thereby strengthen our self images and a vicious or beneficent cycle as the case may be it is set up. For example, a schoolboy who sees himself as a F-type student or a or one who is dumb in mathematics will invariably find that his report card bears him out. Then he find that a young girl who has an image of herself as the sort of person nobody likes will indeed find that she is avoided at school dance. She literally invites rejection. Her woebegone expression, her hand dog manner, her over anxious to please, or perhaps her unconscious hostility towards those she anticipates will affront her, all act to drive away those whom she would attract. In the same manner, a salesman or a businessman will also find that his actual experiences tend to prove his self image is correct. Because of this objective proof, it very seldom occurs to a person that his troubles lies in his self image or his own evaluation of himself. Tell this schoolboy that he is only thinks he cannot master algebra. He will doubt your sanity. He was tried, and still his report cards tells the story. Tell the salesman that it is only an idea that he cannot earn more than a certain figure that he can prove you wrong by his order book. He know only too well how hard he has tried and failed. Yet, as we shall see later, almost miraculous changes have occurred both in students' grades and in the earning capacity of salesmen when they were privileged upon to change their self image. The self image can be changed. Numerous case histories have shown that one is never too young or too old to change his self image and thereby start to live a new life. One of the reasons it is seemed too difficult for a person to change his habits, his personality, or his way of life has been that here that therefore nearly all efforts at change have been directed to the circumference of the self. So, to speak rather than to center, numerous patients have said to me something like the following: if you are talking about positive thinking, I have tried that and it it just doesn't work for me. However, a little questioning invariably brings out that these individuals have employed positive thinking or attempted to employ it either on practical external circumstances or on some particular habit or character defect. I will get that job. I will be more calm and relaxed in the future. The business venture will turn out right for me, etc. But they have never thought to change their thinking about the self that was to accomplish these things. Jesus warned us about the folly of putting a patch of material on an old garment or of putting new wine into old bottles. Positive thinking cannot be used effectively as a patch or a crunch to the same old self image. In fact, it is literally impossible to really think positively about a particular situation as long as you hold a negative concept of yourself. And numerous experiments have shown that once the concept of self is changed, other things consistent with the new concept of self are accomplished easily and without strain. One of the earliest and most convincing experiments along this line was conducted by the late Preston Leakey, one of the pioneers in self image psychology. Leakey conceived of the personality as a system of ideas, all of which must seem to be consistent with one another. Ideas that are consistent with the system are rejected, not believed, and not acted on. The ideas that seem to be consistent with the system are accepted at the very center of this system of idea, this system of ideas, the keystone, the base upon which all else is built, is the individual ego ideal, his self image or his conceptual conception of himself. Lecky was a school teacher and has an opportunity to test his theory on thousands of students. Lecky theorized that if a student has trouble learning a certain subject, it could be because, from student's point of view, it would be consistent for him to learn. Lecky believed, however, that if you could change the student's self conceptions, which underlies this viewpoint, his attitude toward the subject would change accordingly. If the student could be induced to change his self definition, his learning ability should also change. This provoked to be the case. One student who misspelled 55 words out of 100 and flunked so many subjects that he lost credit for a year becomes one of the best spellers in the school and made a general average of 91 in the next year. A boy who was dropped from one college because of poor grade entered Columbia and became a straight A student. A girl who has flunked Latin 4 times after 3 walks with the school counselor finished with a grade of 84. A boy who was told by a testing bureau that he had no aptitude for English won honorable mention the next year for a literary prize. Wow. The trouble with these students was not that they were dumb or lacking in basic aptitudes. The trouble was an inadequate self image. I don't have a mathematical mind, I am just a naturally poor speller. They they identified with their mistakes and failures instead of saying I failed the test, factual and descriptive, they concluded I am a failure. Instead of saying I flunked that subject, they said I am a flunkout. For those who are interested in in learning more about like his work, I recommend securing a copy of his book Self Consistency, A Theory of Personality. Note this book is now out of print. Okay, cool. Like you also used the same method to cure students of such habits as nail biting and stuttering. My own files contains case histories just as convincing. The man who was so afraid of strangers that he seldom ventured out of the house and who now makes his living as a public speaker. And there was the salesman who had already prepared a letter of resignation because he just wasn't cut out for selling. And 6 months later was number one man on the force of 100 salesmen. The minister was who was considering retirement because nerves and the pressure of preparing a sermon a week were getting him down, and now delivers an average of 3 outside talks a week in addition to his weekly sermons, and doesn't know he has never in he has never in this body. How a plastic surgeon became self-interested in self-image psychology. Offhand, there would seem to be little or no connection between surgery and psychology, and it was the work of plastic surgeons that first hinted to me of the existence of self image and raised certain questions that led to important psychological knowledge. When I first began the practice of plastic surgery many years ago, I was amazed by the dramatic and sudden changes in character and personality that often resulted when a facial defect was corrected. Changing the physical image in many instances appeared to create an entirely new person. In case after in in case after case the scalpel that I held in my hand because a magic wand that not only transformed the patient appearance but transformed his whole life. The shy and retiring became bold and courageous. A moronic, stupid boy changed into an alert, bright youngster who went on to become an executive with a prominent firm. A salesman who had lost his touch and his faith in himself became a model of self confidence. And perhaps the most startling of all was the criminal was the habitual hardened criminal who changed almost on it from an incorrigible who had never shown a desire to change into a model prisoner who won a parole and went on to assume a responsible role in society. I reported many such case histories in my book New Faces, New Futures. Following its publication and similar articles in leading magazines, I was busy with questions by criminologists, psychologists, sociologists, and psychiatrists. They asked questions that I could not answer, but they did start me upon a search. Strangely enough, I learned as much, if not more, from my failures as from my success. I learned as much, if not more, from my failures as from my success. It was easy to explain the success, such as the boy with the two big ears, who had been told that he looked like a taxi cab with both doors open. He had been ridiculed all his life, often cruelly associated with the playmates, meant humiliation and pain. Why shouldn't he avoid social context? Why shouldn't he become afraid of people and retire into himself? Terribly afraid to express himself in a way. It was no wonder he became known as a moron. When his ears were corrected, it would seem only natural that that the case of his embarrassment and humiliation had been removed and that he should assume a normal role in life, which he did. Or consider the salesman who suffered a facial disfigurement as the result of an automobile accident. Each morning, when he shaved, he could see the horrible, discouraging scar of his cheek and the grotesque twist to his mouth. For the first time in his life, he became painfully self-conscious. He was ashamed of himself and felt that his appearance must be repulsive to others. The scar became an obsession with him. He was different from the other people. He began to wonder what others were thinking of him. Soon his ego was even more mutilated than his face. He began to lose confidence in himself. He became bitter and hostile. Soon almost all his attention was directed toward himself, and his primary goal became the production of his ego and avoidance of situations that might bring humiliation. It is easy to understand how the correction of his face, disfigurement, and the restoration of a normal face would overnight change this man's entire attitude and outlook, his feelings about himself, and results in greater success in his work. But what about the exceptions who didn't change? The Duchess, who all her life had been terribly shy and self-conscious because of a tremendous hump in her nose. Although surgery gave her a classic nose and a face that was truly beautiful, she still continued to act the part of ugly duckling the unwanted sister who could never bring herself to look another human being in the eye. If the scalpel itself was magic, why did it not work on the Duchess? Or what what about all the others who acquired new faces but weren't right on wearing the same old personality? Or how to explain the reaction of those people who insist that the surgery had made no difference whatsoever in the appearance? Even plastic surgeon has had his experience and has probably been as bluffed by it as I was. No matter how drastic the change in appearance may be, there are certain patients who will insist that I look I look just the same as before. You didn't do a thing. Friends, even family may scarcely recognize them, may become enthusiastic over their newly acquired beauty. Yet the patients themselves insist that they can see only slight or no improvement, or in fact deny that any changes at all has been made. Comparison of before and after photograph does little good except possibly to arouse hostility. By some strange mental alchemy, the patient will rationalize. Of course, I can see that the hump is no longer in nose, but my nose still looks just the same. Or the scar may not show anymore, but it's still there. Scars that bring pride instead of shame. Still, another clue in search of elusive self image was the fact that not all scars or disfragements bring shame or and humiliation. When I was a young medical student in Germany, I saw another student proudly wearing his savage scar, much as an American might wear the Medal of Honor. The jewelists were the elite of college society, and a facial scar was the badge that proved you a member in good standing. To those boys, to these boys, the acquisition of a horrible scar on the cheek had the same psychological effect as the eradication of the scar from the cheek of a patient. In old and you know, in old New Orleans, a Creole wore an eye patch in much the way I began to see that a knife itself held no magical powers. It would be used on one person to inflict a scar and on another to erase a scar with the same psychological results. The mastery of imaginary ugliness to a person handicapped by a genuine congenital defect or suffering an actual facing disfringement as a result of an accident, plastic surgery can indeed seemingly perform magic. For such cases, it would be easy to theorize that the cure all for all neurosis, unhappiness, failure, fear, anxiety, and lack of self confidence would be wholesale plastic surgery to remove all bodily defects. However, according to this theory, person with normal or acceptable faces should be singularly free from all psychological handicaps. They should be cheerful, happy, self confident, free from anxiety and worry. We know only we know only too well that is not true. Nor can such a theory explain the people who visit the office of a plastic surgeon and demand a facelift to cure a purely imaginary ugliness. There are The 35 or 45-year-old women who are convinced that they look old even though their appearance is perfectly normal and in many cases usually attractive. They are the young girls who are convinced that they are ugly merely because their mouth, their nose, or bust measurements does not exactly match that of currently re, reigniting movie queen. That of the currently reigniting movie queen. There are men who believe that their ears are too big or their noses too long. No ethical plastic surgeon would even consider operating on these people, but unfortunately, the quacks or so called beauty doctors, whom no medical association would admit to membership, have no such claims. Such imaginary ugliness is not uncommon. A recent survey of college coeds show that 90% were dissatisfied in some way with their appearance. If the words normal and average mean anything at all, it is obvious that 90% of our problem cannot be abnormal or different or defective in appearance. At similar surveys that have shown that approximately the same percentage of our general population finds some reasoning to be ashamed of their body image. These people react just as if they suffered from an actual disfigurement. They feel the same shame. They develop the same fears and anxieties. Their capacities to really live fully is blocked and choked by the same sort of psychological roadblocks. Their scars, though mental and emotional rather than physical, are just as debilitating. The self image, the real scar. Discovery, discovery of the self image explains all the apparent discrepancies we have been discussing. It is common denominator, the determining factor in all our histories, the failures as well as the success. The secret is this: to live, to really live, that is, to find life reasonably satisfying, you must have an adequate and realistic self image that you can live with. You must find yourself acceptable to you. You must have a wholesome self esteem. You must have a self that you can trust and believe. You must have a self that you are not ashamed to be, and one that you can feel free to express creatively rather than hide or cover up. You must have a self that corresponds to reality so that you can function effectively in a real world. You must know yourself, both your strengths and weaknesses, and be honest with yourself concerning both. Your self image must be a reasonable approximation of you, being neither more than you or nor less than you are less than you are. When this self image is intact and secure, you feel good. When it is threatened, you feel anxious and insecure. When your self image is adequate and one that you can be wholesomely proud of, you feel self confident. You feel free to be you feel free to be yourself and to express yourself. You function at your optimum. When it is an object of shame, you attempt to hide it rather than express it. Creative expression is blocked. You become hostile and hard to get along with. If a scar on the face enhances the self image, as in the case of German Jewish, self esteem and self confidence are increased. If a scar on the face detracts from the self image, as in the case of salesman, loss of self esteem and self confidence results when A facial disfigurement is corrected by plastic surgeon. Dramatic psychological changes result only if there is a corresponding correction of the mutilated self-image. Sometimes the image of a disfigured self persists even after successful surgery, much, much the same as the phantom limb may continue to feel pain years after the physical arm or leg has been amputated. I began a new career. These obvious led me into a new career. Some years ago, I became convinced that people who consult a plastic surgeon need more than surgery, and that sort of them do not need surgery at all. If I were to treat these people as patients, as a whole person rather than as merely a nose, ear, mouth, arm, or leg, I needed to be in a position to give them something more. I needed to be able to show them how to obtain a spiritual facelift, how to remove emotional scars, and how to remove their attitudes and thoughts as well as their physical appearance. This study has been most rewarding. This study has been most rewarding. Today, I am more convinced than ever that what each of us really wants deep down is more life, happiness, success, peace of mind, or whatever your own conception of supreme good may be, is experienced in its essence as more life. When we experience expensive emotions of happiness, self confidence, and success, we enjoy more life. And to the degree that we inhibit our abilities, frustrate our God given talents, and allow ourselves to suffer anxiety, fear, self condemnation, and self hate, we literally choke off the life force available to us and turn our backs on the gifts which our Creator has made. To the degree that we deny the gift of life, we embrace death. Your program for better living. In my option during the past 30 years, psychology has become far too pessimistic regarding man and his potential for both change and greatness. Since psychologists and psychiatrists deal with so called abnormal people, the literature is almost exclusively taken up with man's various abnormalities. His tendencies towards self destruction may many people, I am afraid, have heard so much of this type of a thing that they have come to regard such things as hatred. The destructive instinct, guilt, self condemnation, and all the other negatives as normal human behavior, the average person feels awfully weak and impotent when he thinks of the prospect of pitting his puny will against these negative forces in human nature. In order to gain health and happiness, if this were a true picture of human nature and the human condition, self improvement would indeed be a rather futile thing. However, I believe and the experiences of my many patients have confirmed the fact that you do not have to do the job alone. There is within each of us a life instinct which is forever working toward health, happiness, and all that makes for more life for the individual. This life instinct what for you through what I call the creative mechanism or when used correctly. The successful mechanism built into each human being. New scientific insights into subconscious mind. The new science of cybernetics has finished us with the convincing proof that So called subconscious mind is not a mind at all, but a mechanism, a goal striving servo mechanism consisting of the brain and nervous system, which is used by and directed by the mind. The latest and most usable concept is that man does not have two minds, but a mind or consciousness that operates an automatic goal striving machine. The automatic goal striving machine functions very similar to the way that electronic servo mechanisms function as far as basic principles are concerned, but it is much more marvelous, much more complex than any computer or guided missile ever conceived by man. Some in points. Today, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that all electronic gadgets and computerized technology of any sort, from the internet to cell phone technology or satellites, brings us hundreds of channels on television, were programmed and made functional by human beings who formed a mental picture of something they thought was possible, then made it happen. We human beings not only have the capacity to create a cybernetic system outside of ourselves, but also the ability to learn how we can run our own cybernetic system in ourselves. This creative mechanism within you is impersonal. It will work and automatically and impersonally to achieve goals of success and happiness, or unhappiness and failure, depending on the goals that you yourselves set for it. Presented with success goals and its functions as a success mechanism. Present it with negative goals and it operates just as impersonally and just as faithful as a failure mechanism. Dr. Martz make it clear that all of us have goals, whether we intentionally articulate them or not. The brain and nervous system are continually leading us in the direction of images we think about consciously, or images that are so much important of us that we are led toward them in autopilot. The alcoholic or drug addict has goals just as much as the entrepreneur, politician, professional athlete, or mother to be. What this in mind, we can become aware of under the hood, and whether or not we want the goals we are unconsciously moving toward, or the ones that we consciously choose and work toward. Like any other servo mechanism, it must have a clear cut goal, objective, or problem to work. The goals that our own creative mechanism seeks to achieve our mental images and mental pictures, which we create by the use of imagination. The key goal image is our self image. Our self image prescribes the limit for the accomplishment of any particular goals. It prescribes the area of possible. Like any other servo mechanism, our creative mechanism works on information and data that we feed into it, our thoughts, beliefs, interpretations. Though our attitudes and interpretations of situations, we describe the problem to be worked on. If we feed information and data into our creative mechanism to effect that, we ourselves are unworthy, inferior, and undeserving, incapable, negative self, negative self-image. This data is processed and acted on as it any other data in the given was the answer in the form of objective experience. Like any other servo mechanism or creative mechanism makes us of stored information or memory in solving current problems and corresponding to current situations. Your program for getting more living out of life consists in first of all learning something that is creative mechanism or automatic guidance systems within you and how to use it as a success mechanism rather as a failure mechanism. The method itself consists in learning, practicing, and experiencing new habits of thinking, imagining, remembering, and acting in order to develop an adequate and realistic self image. Use your creative mechanism to bring success and happiness in achieving particular goals. If you can remember, worry, or tie your shoe, you can succeed. As you will see later, the method to be used consists of creative mental picturing, creatively experiencing through your imagination, and the formation of new automatic reason patterns by acting out and acting as if. I often tell my parents if you can remember, worry, or tie your shoe, you will have no trouble applying this method. The things you are called upon to are simple, but the most practice and most experience visualizing is not more difficult than what you do when you remember some scene out of the past and worry about the future. Acting out new actions patterns is no more difficult than deciding the following through on tying your shoes in a new and different each mo- different manner each morning. Instead of continuing to tie them in your old habitual way without thought or decision. Dr. March words, if you can remember, worry, or tie your shoe, are key to understand how easy it is to get results using psychocybernetics. Provided you all yourself to believe that even a seemingly small victory, learning to tie your shoe or writing your name for the first time, is all you need to reverse the course of negative in your life. In order to direct your servo mechanism towards success instead of failures, all you need is one experience that made you feel good about yourself. Remembering and then using that modest accomplishment will be instrumental in proving your self image. You do not need a huge success experience to alter your self image for the better. You do not need an experience that is a mirror of what you are trying to create or accomplish. All you need is an experience like tying shoe or learning to write your name for the first time, wherein you can say, yes, I'm glad I learned that skill. Yes, I remembered the first day I could do it. Yes, I was happy. This one memory, this one positive experience, no matter how long, no matter how long ago it took place, is all you need to begin changing the course of your life in the present. Key points to remember: your case history, and here was the chapter 2. Hence, I completed chapter 1 by reading 44 minutes, and yeah, I completed chapter 1 from Maxwell Maltz Psycho-Cybernetics from Maxwell Maltz from page number 24 to page number 24 to page number 36. I have read. Cool. Nice.